Everyone, my name's Kelly, and today I'm going to be explaining how I automated a boring everyday task with Python and Cron Jobs. So basically this involved using the MailChimp API, the Google Drive API, and setting up a cron job. If you want to skip straight to where I explain the code, feel free. I've got a timestamp down below. This is also part one of 2 projects that I automated using cron jobs, so stay tuned for the next one. But now a little bit more about what the project actually does. So I've been helping my father out for the past year with doing the marketing for a boating app he's developing. This involves going into Google Drive and downloading the file of users. The users file includes the users' email addresses, which we use to send them email updates about new features we've added to Argo, tutorials, all kinds of fun things. But if the email addresses are just stuck in that file, we can't really do anything with them. So I have to go through, find all the new users each day, and import them into MailChimp, where we can actually send them emails and communicate. So, boring everyday task. I've wanted to automate it for a long time, but when I first got this job helping out, I didn't know any code. So 1 year later, now I can automate it. So let's see how I did that. So let's dig into this code. First off, this is my GitHub repo. You can find all the code in this little walkthrough here. If you want to dig into it some more or borrow something, you're welcome to do whatever you want with it. I'm going to be using a few tutorials, or I used a few tutorials. So first, there's the Google Drive documentation. This Python Quick Start tutorial was wonderful. Helped me set up the authentication and get a Google Drive client real easy. I'll put the links to all of these down below in the description too. This is the MailChimp Marketing API Quick Start Guide. It helps you find your API keys, your server identifier, whatever it was, and set up a MailChimp client to get you off and running. It'll also describe all like the API endpoints you can hit. And then I decide to send myself emails about like the status of how many people I imported each day, or the script import each day. So I just use this quick little tutorial from Real Python. Love them. And that is basically all the tutorials I use. I'll link them down below, and this is my repo, or my code. So let me walk you through the main function. Basically, so it's called main. I print out the date and the time for my cron log so I can see what day this is, just kind of get a little bit of identification for what, if I get an error, what it's coming from, when it happened. I load my .env variables into the script, so basically this will be like my MailChimp API key, like my Gmail password for sending the emails, that type of stuff. I get them all in there. Then I go and I get the file ID for the Google Drive file I'm accessing that has all the user information and emails. Then I go and I get a Google Drive connection, and I'll go into more detail about these functions in a bit, but I'm just going to go over basically high-level overview right now. So I get my Google Drive client, then I read the file contents into this variable file contents. It's going to be a byte string. So that is this function here I've defined called print file content, takes the Google Drive client and the file ID, and it just gets the byte string of the entire CSV file, which is massive. And then I basically extract all the important data from that file, basically only the like 30 or so new users and their emails. And I do that by getting the last user ID that I've imported from my .env file. So every time I run this program, it'll actually update what the last user ID was that I imported, so that this is constantly being incremented. And then I get all the things that I need from the massive byte string. And then I check to see if there's actually anything in the data frame that I created. So basically, were there any new users? And if there were new users, then I go and I get myself a MailChimp client to use to subscribe them. And then I actually subscribe them, passing in the data frame that I formatted and the MailChimp client. And then I increment that last user ID variable that I used up here. And if there were no new users, I just send myself a quick little email saying, hey, script ran, it's all good, but there were no new subscribers. So that's that. And then I've got my if name equals main, I run that function. And to run the cron job, I have a nice little script set up here that just CDs into the right directory, so I can be using relative paths in my code instead of absolute paths, which I find very convenient. I activate the virtual environment, I run the function, and then I deactivate my virtual environment. And I've got just a handy little comment here to help me out where if I have an error and I need to look at my cron logs, like as they're being outputted, I can just type this into my terminal and it'll show me that. So look, if we want to look at the cron tab, this is my cron tab. So you can see in here, I tried to set up automatic mailing in the cron tab, but it did not work. So I had to manually create a Python script that would send me email. But that's that. This is the syntax to tell cron how often to run your script. There's a handy website called Cron Guru that'll help you out with that. I'll link it down below in the description. But this basically right here, this is saying run it every day at 9:01 a.m. You can see the 9 right there for the hour and the 1 for the minute. And then this is the absolute path to the file that's going to be run, aka this one. And then this syntax right here is just saying if there are any errors or things printed out, put them all in this little cronlog.txt file, which you can see that's right there. So I can go check that, check the tail or whatever, and see what's happening. So I find that very convenient. Let's get out of here. And you can see actually, so when it runs, it will send me email saying, oops, that's from experiment earlier, basically how many people were imported, if anyone was subscribed, and this is the email right here. I was doing a little bit of testing this morning, so it actually ended up where like I didn't subscribe anyone new, I only updated people, which is fine. It ran properly. It's telling me exactly what it did, and that's exactly what it did. So if you're interested, I'm going to go through all of my functions that help make this run. If not, you just wanted the high-level overview, feel free to pop off. So let's go into this Google Drive file right here. To start, we have the get service function that basically gets the Google Drive client that we can use to make requests against Google Drive. You have to define what scope you want. If you're going to be reading files in your Google Drive, you need at least like a scope or permission that'll let you read the files, which this drive.read-only lets me do that. You can read about different scope levels online in their documentation. This I basically just borrowed from the quick start tutorial I showed you. It helps set up authentication if this is your first time running the script. If not, it goes into this file token.pickle, gets the tokens that authorize you to access your Google Drive, and then it returns a client that allows you to hit the API basically. And so once we've got that, so that's right here, then we're going to print the file content, which basically goes in, gets the file of file ID, the file ID that's passed in, and it returns the byte string. You can look up this function on the documentation. That's basically all it does, just gets a massive byte string of the file. So now we have that, and we're going to get the last user ID so that we only get the users we need. And then we're going to reformat that massive byte string into a nice little pandas data frame that only has what we need in it. And this function, reformat CSV, is up here. So we take the byte string and the last user ID, and we turn it into a normal string, then we format it like a CSV, and then we read the CSV into the pandas data frame. We sort the values based off the ID. The ID is starts at 1 and it goes up to like whatever number user we're at now, like 12,000 or something. So it sorts them in order, and then it gets rid of all of that might actually be not necessary. I'm going to go look at that after this video, but this function this line of code right here, 26, basically gets rid of all the users that I've already imported, all the user IDs that are less than the last user ID variable, so that we only have a small number to work with instead of like the 12,000 users that are in that file. And then it takes the column names that we want to keep and it drops the rest. And then it returns the data frame. So we can work with it and subscribe those few number of people that are in that file, or the data frame. So that's that. And then we check to see if there's anyone actually in the data frame. And if there are, then we're going to get the MailChimp client, which is in here. And that basically just takes your MailChimp API key, your MailChimp server, which I've stored in my .env file, and it uses the MailChimp marketing package, which you can pip install. It'll be in the requirements.txt of this project, and you just basically create a client. Very, very simple. Then you subscribe and tag everyone, which I wrote a fairly complex function for. It's probably the longest function in this project. But it takes the data frame and the MailChimp client, and it basically subscribes everyone to the audience using the bulk subscribe feature of MailChimp's API, and then it bulk tags them. So one thing I do when I subscribe these people to MailChimp's my audience is I tag everyone as downloaded the app. So I need to do that as well with the API. So basically, there's also one other thing to take into consideration. The MailChimp bulk subscribe API endpoint only takes up to 500 users at a time. So you have to make sure that as you're subscribing people, you only send 500 users at a time instead of more than that. But it can take up to that much, which makes your work process much faster if you're subscribing a lot of people. So to do that, I'm keeping a list of all the subscribers, a list of all the emails for tagging them, and then a count so I can make sure I don't go over that 500 limit. And if I do hit that, I just send them away, or the people away, and subscribe them. Here I'm creating a few variables to keep track of just how many people I've added, how many people I've updated, any errors and what the errors were, which MailChimp returns in the response from the API request. So I'm keeping track of all that, and I'm going to put it in the email that I send to myself so I get the stats about the daily import. So this right here is going through each row in the data frame, and it is creating, let's skip this for right now, it is creating a member dictionary, which is defined on the MailChimp API page. It just basically is the email address of the person, which I just index into the data frame at the current row, and I get the email address. Just plug that value in, which is basically what I'm doing for all these. But you got the email address, the status, the merge fields. Merge fields are something that MailChimp uses where if you want to have different fields other than just the email address, you can add, like I added the user ID, the provider, the username, and you can name these. I didn't name them when I created them, so they're these weird merge 3 type syntaxes. So I just basically plug in all the values there. You do have to change values to normal integers or values versus a NumPy integer, which MailChimp does not like. So keep that in mind. Then I append each of these member dictionaries to the subscribers list, and then I append the email to the emails list, and I increment the count, which you can see that as I'm going through this data frame, if I end up having a count that equals 499, I subscribe everyone. I send all the people to MailChimp. I'll show you that function in a second. I just basically pass the subscriber list in. I take the values that are returned in the response from MailChimp, which are these. I'll show you that I filter those in the function, but I basically just increment these values based off what was returned, and then I reset count to 0, and I reset the subscribers list to being empty so I can start filling it up again with the next values as I go through the data frame. which you can see once I get out of that little for loop there, I subscribe anyone who has not already been subscribed. And I once again increment these values so that I can report everything in the email that I send to myself. So let's check out the bulk subscribe. So in order to subscribe people with MailChimp, you need to know your list ID, which you can see here. And to get that, I ran a few different functions that they had defined in the MailChimp API that let me look at like which lists were in my account. I just like hard-coded a lot of these values. Like here, I wanted to get the list merge field so I knew what they were. And I just used hard-coded the list ID, which you can look through these functions to help you get everything set up and just replace my hard-coded values with your hard-coded values. And then you can find the values you need for these functions. But so, I found out that my list ID was this right here. So I got my subscriber list, I've got my MailChimp client, and then I just use this nice little line of code right there that I found on the MailChimp documentation, and I push them to MailChimp. And I get a response back, and I just take the values out of that response that I care about, and I return them, which includes the total created, the total updated, the error count, and the errors. If there's a actual error with the API client, it will print it out and then it'll quit, and I'll be able to see that in the cron log. The next thing that happens in main, let's jump back over here, is I tag everyone. So remember I was putting the emails in a list as well. That is so I can bulk tag all of the people I just added to Argo's the app, the Argo MailChimp audience. And that is a pretty simple little function right here that takes the tag ID that I want to tag the new subscribers with, which, like I said, there are functions down below that you can use to figure out what the actual tag ID is that you want to use. It once again takes the list ID and then it just sends that away to MailChimp, which you can find the exact specification for what you need to send on MailChimp in the documentation. And that too sends back a JSON response object. And I just take what I need from that and I return it to my other function. So that function takes these values that I've been tracking, such as the total created, the total updated, the error count, errors, and the tags, and it sends it to my email function, which will email me the stats for the daily upload. And that is in here, mail logs. So this right here is sending me an email where it tells me how many people, like I said, how many people I subscribed, updated, etc. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically you just need to tell it what email you're sending from, what email you're sending to, and the password for that email. Set up an SMTP server. For Gmail, I was using Gmail. You can do other things, but I recommend just heading over to the tutorial from RealPython for that. But yeah, so this just says the message, define the subject, and then I send it right here. And that shows up in my email inbox. And that is what I do if there are subscribers or new users. And if there are not new users, then this part runs, which basically just sends me an email that says there were no new people to import to the MailChimp audience, which is another email right below that's defined right here. And it just basically has for a message, no new users to import today. So that way I know the cron job ran, because currently I have it set up so it only runs if my computer is actually in use versus asleep or turned off. So I just want to make sure it's running. I have that little like reminder in my email like, okay, everything's good. And then, oops, I forgot one thing. So if I did actually import subscribers, I increment the last user ID that's stored in my .env file. So this basically figures out, here, this is the function, figures out what the maximum ID was that I imported into the MailChimp audience. So basically what was the last user I imported. And then it stores it in the .env file. And then next time I run this, it will only import the users after that ID. So if I import it up through user 10, next time it'll start at user 11 and it'll ignore all the users from 10 like below. And yeah, so that's that. Let's check it out. Let me run it real quick. I'll just run like a test version. It's not actually going to subscribe anyone because I've already subscribed everyone today, but it'll send an email and you'll get to see how it all works. So I'm going to activate my virtual environment. Then I'm just going to run python main.py and it'll run this function right here. And then I'll show you the email and proof it all works. There we go. And it takes a little bit of time to actually send the email because it's, especially importing pandas, I find takes a decent amount of time. So, all right, so it ran, outported the time, which I have for the cron logs. It'll capture that along with any errors. And I think I just heard an email that showed up. So let's check that out. Yep, so this right here is my no new users import email. No new Argo users to import today, so it just let me know everything's fine, but there was no one to import, and that is that. So that was a bit of a quick, long-winded explanation. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. If you stuck with me this whole time, thank you very much. I appreciate you. It's a lot of fun to go back through the code and explain everything and like demonstrate that like you actually know what you wrote. So I enjoy these little exercises, and once again, thanks for sticking around and stay tuned for the next automation video / tutorial post I create. It's really cool. I use Python Selenium to basically open a web browser and just magically do things without me ever touching the keyboard or the mouse. So stay tuned. Thank you.